on a planetary scale. Embrace the challenge we face and do something we humans are very good at. Change the world.
Welcome to the Finance and Governance Committee of Denver City Council. This meeting of the Finance and Governance Committee begins now.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, April 4th, Election Day in Denver. Hopefully you've all gone out and voted. This is Finance and Governance Committee. I'm Amanda Sawyer, representing District 5, and I have the honor of chairing this committee. Thanks for joining us today. We have an action item and a briefing, but before we get started, we're gonna go ahead and go online to start with introductions of council members. No one online yet? Okay, guess we're not gonna go online then. Why don't we start all the way to the left with Councilmember Kniech.
Good afternoon, Robin Kniech at large.
Jamie Torres, District 3.
All right, we are gonna go ahead and get started with the Department of Finance. Go ahead.
So I am here today to talk about the Dahlia facility, the purchase and sale agreement. Just as some context background, in 2019, City Council took action that required a transition away from the for-profit services that were being utilized in the community corrections for providers. Denver Community Corrections commenced a thoughtful and responsible transition strategy, and you can see the groups listed at the locations which have closed includes William Street, Thule Hall, which we did acquire subsequent to that, Columbine, Ulster, and Fox, which were all CoreCivic locations. Community Corrections Advisory Group was formed in the late 2019. They developed 10 recommendations and 2 additional concepts for exploration. Important to note for this discussion is recommendation 3, which states the city should explore the possibility of leasing or purchasing 1 or more CoreCivic Community Corrections zoned properties. So we are here with 4511 East 46th Avenue, both identified in the outline there, so just north of I-70. The proposed acquisition, the purchase price is $8 million. The seller is Correctional Management, Inc. The premises is approximately 20,000 square feet. The bed capacity would be up to 100 beds. The seller will complete some minor tenant improvements, which will include an ADA restroom. They may, on our behalf, while they're in there, if we find that we need an upgrade to fire life safety, primarily the notification system, they will complete that and we will reimburse on actual expenses at closing. The approximate closing date is first quarter 2024, and this is in Council District 8. And with that, the request for 0336 approves the purchase and sale agreement with Correctional Management, Inc. to purchase a building located at 4511 East 46th Avenue in Denver. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Lisa. As always, you keep it quick.
Trying.
Really appreciate that. And I want to acknowledge Greg Morrow is also here. He's our community corrections guru. So thanks for joining us. And I want to thank you for all of your hard work in implementing the strategy over the last 4 years. You have done an incredible job, so thank you. Okay, gonna get started with questions, and we have Councilmember Torres, Council President Torres. Sorry.
I'm also a council member. It's all good. Thank you, Madam Chair. Greg, just if you can just give me a reminder, and maybe our viewers as well, are folks currently being served at Dahlia, or would this be setting up for new services?
Yeah. Good morning, Greg Morrow, Director of Community Corrections. Council President Torres, yes, currently there are right around 85, maybe up to 90 men being served at the Dahlia facility today.
Okay, and with that, would our acquisition of the building, would we be able to have like continuous service, or would there be a break at any point?
I think that remains to be seen. Obviously, the council just approved an extension of the operating agreement through June of 24, so it buys us some time depending upon the closure of the property, whether we would just step in and assume operations, or whether there would need to be a drawdown and a build back up.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Black.
Thank you. Greg, I have a question for you, and I know you presented at Safety, I think last week or the week before, but can you remind me how this council decision impacted the number of people who've been able to live in community corrections over these past few years? What was it before council made that decision? I was not one of the people that did that. And then how has the number of people served changed?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Black. So in 2019, the city had 748 residential beds or placement slots available to folks. Over the past 3.5 to 4 years, we're now at 383. The majority of the lost capacity is related to the decision, which set forth into action our departure and termination of agreements with the GEO Group and CoreCivic. We did have 2 other programs closed unrelated to that council decision, primarily because of the pandemic and the difficulty to sustain operations, but the majority of beds were lost because of our decision to close and separate from those 2 vendors.
So it's about half as many people.
Yeah, and the consequence of that, as I explained at the Safety Committee, is there's approximately 300 individuals that are awaiting placement either in prison or in our jail system.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. And Greg, really appreciate you being here today. I know you did present at Safety a couple of weeks ago, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, on this proposal. Just curious whether, we know this one is coming through, we've acquired Thule Hall. Do we have eyes on other potential locations? Or Lisa, maybe you want to take this one?
I do. We are still looking. There is something that we are trying to work on. We're just not at a place yet that it's concrete enough to really speak to, but we're still trying to make sure that we can identify another site for additional beds.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm just gonna give it one more minute for any further questions. Otherwise, can I please get a mover and a seconder? Oh, Councilmember Kniech.
I just want to go on the record and say thank you. This has been a deep concern, priority area that I have advocated for, and I want to thank CoreCivic for honoring their commitment and to the team for making this purchase happen. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Council President Torres has moved. I need a second, please. Councilmember Kniech. Do we need a roll call vote? Thumbs up from everybody? All right, great. Then we'll see you on the floor. Thank you very much. Okay, next up we have a briefing from National Western Center on your energy recovery system. So do you guys need help with technology transition?
Possibly.
We'll just give it a minute for tech transition here. Awesome, thank you.
Great, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come to you and talk about what has been an incredible project on the National Western Center campus and an incredible partnership with the City and County of Denver and the Western Stock Show Association and Colorado State University. Just a couple of slides to remind you of what our campus energy system is. Our district energy system, it's a thermal heat recovery system that captures waste thermal energy, recycled thermal energy from two very large diameter sanitary sewer lines, the Delgany Interceptor lines, where the sanitary sewer lines from primarily downtown and Center City neighborhoods flow north towards Metro Water Recovery's water treatment plant and processes. Those lines, while they have waste in them, what they have a lot of is hot water. It's sinks and showers and washers and things like that. So that's the thermal energy that we're capturing. Council approved a contingent commitment agreement in 2020 for us to pursue the project. We completed the project on Earth Day last year, April 22nd, 2022, just shy of a year ago. And our goal was to, create a sustainable system to heat and cool slightly over 1 million square feet of new vertical facilities when it's fully built out on the campus in the most sustainable way possible. But it also obviously forwards the city's sustainability goals as well. The district's energy system captures wastewater, as I said, coming from downtown and Center City neighborhoods. That effluent is pulled out, goes through a heat exchanger process where we either pull cold or hot, depending on what we're wanting to do, through a heat exchanger, and then fresh water circulates around a large campus-wide ambient loop. From that, heat, hot, and cold air are created in the buildings through heat pump systems and air handlers that provide either air conditioning in the summer or heating in the wintertime. And then the effluent continues on its way to back to Metro Water Recovery's treatment process plant. Does my cursor show on that screen? It doesn't, does it? It does? Okay. So if you can see where the red circle is there, that's where our central utility plant is. The Delgany Interceptor kind of runs along the river's edge along National Western Drive. And it will provide the heating and cooling for these three green buildings, these Spur Vita, Spur Hydro, and Spur Terra, the CSU buildings. The stock shows a headquarters, WSSA's legacy building, the livestock center, which is under construction now, and a future equestrian center. It also serves the Stockyards Event Center that is operational now. So there are right now 4 structures that are being served by the building, by the system. The shot on the left is the exterior of the central utility plant and obviously some interior. We show the glass on the corner. It's a see in, see out. It's very much an interpretive and educational facility where we can do tours on the facility, and we've done lots of those. Some of the benefits, providing 90% of the heating and cooling for phases 1 and 2, scalable for future building needs as well, gives us lifespan price certainty on the campus. Obviously, it's very sustainable. It avoids 2,600 metric tons of CO2. That's the equivalent of 6.6 million passenger vehicle miles a year. And it saves a lot of water because it reduces the use of cooling towers, the equivalent of more than 5 Olympic-sized swimming pools each year. It's part of the whole microgrid at the campus. The campus is a refuge area, so it'll have battery backup. It has solar systems as well as and you all approved and supported, thank you very much, our community solar garden, which is up and running now. We are the first 2 buildings we're the first of the citywide community solar garden project. And as I mentioned, buried a couple of significant pipelines that also separated pedestrians and citizens from accessing the river's edge. Lastly, and this was a complaint from the community for a long time, the old pipe sat above grade. It was very old pipe, and it was not airtight. And so it was odoriferous, and that just really helped to obviously mitigate that issue. Here's some pictures of what it was. You can see the river's edge, and you can see those big gray pipes running along. That's where they were. They were sitting on top of the ground because Metro Wastewater's goal was to bleed waste heat out of the lines to cool the effluent, because not only are they treating it, they have to match the temperature before it can go back into the river so it doesn't hurt the ecosystem. And this is what it looks like today. That area of the river has completely reclaimed and renovated. Mayor's Office of National Western Center completed that work last fall. It will be, thank goodness we're getting all this great spring moisture. We'll have great green grass. That's sod there, but a lot of it is native grasses. And we'll be doing a ribbon cutting for this project in May. So in terms of the building system performance, we met or exceeded our MWBE goals on budget and on time for both design and construction. We've had our campus energy agreement includes community benefits, and they have made 2 community investment fund contributions, both in 22 and 23. It has been a significant tour generator for us. Folks literally from all over the world have wanted to come to the National Western Center to learn about the system. We won the Engineering News Records Project of the Year in 2022 in the Rocky Mountain region. As I said, we've connected to the 3 CSU spur buildings, Vita, Terra, and Hydro, Stockyards Event Center, and obviously, again, forwarding all the campus and city goals. So the deal structure is that we entered into an agreement with a campus energy agreement for 40 years. It was a design, build, finance, operate, maintain agreement for 40 years. So they provide us thermal capacity for all of our buildings. The total estimated project cost, $185.6 million over 40 years. That includes the design and construction costs of $32 million, financing, replacement costs, utilities, insurance. It is a full start to finish, and it will be handed back to us in I won't say like new, but in very good operational conditions. We're able to continue to use the system after it's completely paid off. So to make those payments, we charge our users, CSU and WSSA, and ourselves for the buildings where we're operating events in. And then the building owners and event operators to use the campus energy system. That's how we do it. As the system is ramping up, we've had our contingent credit agreement, and Margaret will talk about that in just a minute. And the fees are based on capacity load. So it isn't how much you use, it isn't what temperature you keep your thermostat at, it's literally capacity. So the Stock Show has 7.2% of the system, Colorado State University has 33.33% of the system, and the authority, city-owned, authority-operated facilities have 59.47% of the system capacity. We will now jump into information on the contingent commitment.
Thanks, Brad. Margaret Daniels, our Chief Financial Officer, and I'm going to talk about the contingent commitment agreement. This was an agreement that Council approved in July of 2020, and it was necessary because the authority, being a brand new organization, entity, did not have the financial background or wherewithal to sort of support this 40-year agreement with the system developer. So the city agreed to provide credit support through this contingent commitment agreement to enable financing of the project. And through the agreement, the city will seek to provide loans to the authority to cover those annual energy payments, anything that's a shortfall between what is scheduled to be paid and what the authority has available to pay, specifically during the early years of those agreements. We knew at the time of entering into this agreement, and we shared this during our briefings with council, is that while buildings are coming online and the authority is ramping up with their events, that there would be some early years, and we specifically said at least the first 10 years, where we would need, the city would need to sort of shore up the payments that the authority would make to the developer. So the city loan covers any shortfalls between what the authority owes and what they've collected through the campus events, both for their own events and facilities, as well as for the Western Stock Show Association owned facilities. And we included the WSSA because they were in a similar boat. They don't have the size, scale, or financial background or track record to support what was needed for the financing. So the city agreed to cover any shortfalls between the authority and the WSSA during the term of this agreement. Again, these are loans to the authority, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. we can terminate the contingent commitment agreement under certain conditions. And they are primarily if the authority reaches some level of financial maturity where they have a single A credit rating for 3 consecutive years and meet one of 2 other thresholds about cash flow or coverage for the outstanding commitments that it has. So those are built into the loan. These are the original projections that that was shared with council when we came for the contingent commitment agreement. So you can see the projections, the estimates that we had for loan advances for the years 2022 to 2023, totaling $7.726 million. Any loans that the city would forward to the authority through this agreement would be appropriated through either the annual budget process or a supplemental process. And then city loans are paid back to the city through excess revenues from the authority. Sources for the city loans come from a variety of funding sources. CIP, the Capital Improvement Program budget, pays for approximately 59% of the annual loan advance. 2C maintenance funds, these are the dedicated revenue sources for maintenance, and the authority is an eligible recipient there for the campus. And then the general fund is about 38%. The city loan, the terms for the city loan, it's 20 years plus 1 additional 5-year extension if that's needed. It has an interest rate of the 5-year U.S. Treasury rate plus 100 basis points or 1% at the date that we ink the loan. And then it is paid at maturity. The authority does not owe interest or payment until at maturity, and there's no penalty for prepaying the loan back to the city early. So digging into some of the early years with the contingent commitment agreement, you can see on the year, we've listed out the year, the 2020 loan projection. That was the same numbers that I showed on the previous slide. What we've actually paid to date and the difference. And then we've talked in the last 3 columns sort of why we've incurred those differences. So let's start with the year 2021. The system was not active yet. First payment was actually due in 2022 on the system, but due to the fact that some of the CSU buildings were coming online early before the system was active, the city and the authority agreed to share in a portion of the cost to connect the early buildings at CSU to systems that would allow them to open early. So that was the reason for the 2021 payment, that it was temporary services due to CSU's Spur building, VITA, being online early. In 2022, we projected that the city would support $928,000 in loans, and we actually paid $610,000 more than that. That was also partially due to the temporary services connecting that CSU building early. That was the first few months of the year and the costs there to do so until the April 2022 opening date of the system. There was also a little bit extra that was also owed due to some other pandemic-induced construction delays. And I want to just pause there for a minute because that is a real story here. When we came to you in 2020 to approve this agreement, there was a certain schedule of building openings and costs that we were projecting at the time. And then the pandemic happened. And I think it's a pretty well-known story that the city, as well as a lot of other construction projects, experienced supply chain delays, subsequent cost escalations, and other things. So we certainly saw that within this project and continue to see some of those sort of chain effect of what started in 2020 is still affecting us today, that we're seeing significant cost escalations, which cause us to sort of rework some of our projects, and supply chain issues are getting to be better, but costs are still very real for this. So it was just sort of a chain effect of buildings not being open when they were scheduled according to this agreement. And so therefore the authority cannot do events in those buildings, and that is some of the offsetting revenue for this agreement. So just wanted to share with you all reasons for what we're seeing with the discrepancy for what our projections were in 2020 and where we are today. The good news is that we also have a cap on the city exposure under this agreement, and so we are not expecting anything above that unless it was a change order. And because we're through construction, we're not expecting change orders to occur now that the system is open. Back to you.
Thank you, and my apologies, council members. I neglected to introduce myself when I stepped up. I'm Brad Buchanan. I'm the CEO of the National Western Center Authority. I just will close by saying this project is at the core of one of the major, most significant guiding principles of the National Western Center around sustainability and regenerative design, and also benefiting community. And this project certainly has done that both near and far. So we're here to answer any questions you have about anything we've presented today. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We'll start with Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation. Margaret, you mentioned in your presentation what the source of the funds were, but it's not in the PowerPoint. Can you just, I know it was CIP, general fund, and something else.
CIP is, I believe it's 59% of the cost. 2C maintenance funds, those are the dedicated funds for both the campus at the National Western and the Convention Center, and the general fund would be 38%. The maintenance funds are 3%.
3?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Brad, I have a question. I love this project. I was very excited about it when you brought it forward. I know some people weren't. I don't know why, because it's pretty amazing. But on your diagram, where you show the district energy system, is it possible for that energy to be used for any buildings that aren't part of the campus? Anybody else downstream?
Certainly, the capacity in the Delgany interceptor is substantial, and we are taking some small fraction of that. I know that there are definitely projects upstream that are looking at the same type of system. I would say there needs to be pretty significant scale, because the infrastructure, the heat exchange system, has that upfront capital cost, and it needs to be a scenario where they're probably going to be a long-term hold. This is an equivalent cost to a gas and electric system where we were buying utilities from Excel, but it takes about 40 years to get that full payback done.
But could anyone tap into your infrastructure that you already have?
If they were close enough for us to extend, one, we'd have to have capacity, which could expand capacity. It's modular and can be expanded. And two, they would have to be geographically close enough that they could connect into the ambient loop.
So,
but yes.
Yeah, maybe on the west side of the river there or something?
If you could get the pipe across the river, yes.
All right, interesting. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Councilmember Kniech.
Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all coming. I know this was my request to bring this to committee, and we had a couple exchanges. So I'm not sure we got all of the information that we talked about, and I know I was out last week, so if you had followed back up again with a draft of the presentation, I might not have been able to respond. So I'm going to start with, I guess, a question about what I see in front of me is what I think of as half of the information. So I think of in terms of any spreadsheet is there's expenditures and then there's revenues. And so what I guess I feel like I'm missing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is what you've described as an agreement that commits the city to cover a shortfall between what the authority owes and what's collected from users. What I'm not seeing is anything related to the authority's ability to pay. And so I feel like I'm missing half of the spreadsheet. And so what I don't know is whether or not the column that's missing is a fixed amount. What I thought I'd asked for and what I thought I communicated was the idea of what the authority's revenues were. One of the things that your main source of revenue was supposed to be events, and obviously there was some expectation that 2020's pandemic might, and obviously construction delays, might have impacted the ability to start generating event revenue. You didn't mention that actually, Margaret. You didn't actually mention that there was actually a revenue shortfall. So I'm just curious about where the other half of the data is in terms of the ability to pay. And so I guess, you know, I don't know, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the structure of the deal, but it just feels like we only have half the information. So help me out why we don't have, when you talk about a shortfall, I don't know how I would only have half this information.
So the way the deal is structured, that if there's $1 million of payment that year, and we projected that we would have $150,000 of revenue, we projected that the city loan would be $850,000, for example. And it was modeled using the campus model around event activation in 2019, that basically those the activation ramped up based on when buildings were going to come online, and then understanding that event facilities don't become 100% active in year one. So we have a model for that that informed the projections that we presented to you in 2020. In fact, in 2021 and 2022, we actually we had some revenue. We are operating the Stockyards Event Center. We do have some revenue there. Colorado State University is making their 33.3% payment. They are paying in full as projected, exactly to the penny we projected. The Livestock Center and Equestrian Center were projected to be online this year and operating. They are not. And so, and then the big contributor early on was the temporary energy that we had to provide to heat and cool the VITA building that came on prior to the full system being operational in April of last year.
Got it. I think I might need Margaret to come up and answer this. Just so, and I want to be really clear. I think this is a question a little bit for my colleagues. So I'm gonna go back a minute. So I think we're here today in part because I asked for this briefing. And I think here's the question for council, which is what we've been getting is construction updates and contract approvals. Here's the price of a construction contract, and that's what we've been monitoring. And I think that this project and what's happening on this site includes a whole bunch more numbers. And I think the question for this body is, what does it look like to monitor the full set of financials on this project? And it is not just the price of construction and the approval of contracts. We have to look at revenue too, and I don't feel that we've been doing that. And this is another piece of financials, and we don't have any revenue on the slide. And I'm sorry, I really do think that in both of the emails that I responded to when you asked what I wanted, I think I talked about that. I really do think that I said I need to understand what the revenue is and whether it has been as expected or short. And so I think that I don't necessarily think anyone's done anything wrong or that there's a problem. But here's my fear. I want to understand how it is that each year you all are determining how much of the general fund, you know that this has been an issue for me. our general fund is going for a big entertainment complex project. And in the end, this project is going to pay some of the general fund back. And that's good. But for right now, and especially going into some times when our budget is tighter, I didn't love the fact that the general fund was going to this project. I was not very comfortable with it. And we're going to get to the idea I had about what should be paying for it instead. We're going to get there eventually. But I want to understand how it is that you're scouring the revenue side from all these buildings to determine that the least amount of loan dollars are needed each year. And then how it is that we as a council on an annual basis or whatever basis is appropriate are also seeing those figures to follow along. And I'm not sure that that's been happening. And I think it's tough. What's the institutional memory of this body as we have a big administration turnover if someone doesn't ask? We haven't looked at these numbers since we approved this deal. Right? And I kind of remembered and kind of asked about it because I felt like all we were seeing was construction numbers, but that's not the only numbers related to this deal. And again, I'm not saying anything's off track. I understand that these things, the pandemic had a huge impact. So just because things change does not mean that any wrongdoing occurred. I want to be really, really clear. But do you see my discomfort with the fact that you're telling me we have these loan amounts, but you haven't showed me any of the revenues that the loan amounts were based on, making up the difference? It's not a spreadsheet that's complete. So please explain to me what work you all do to look at each of those revenue sources to verify why this is the amount of loan you have to pay. Our dollars should be the very last dollar paid. So I want to understand how you know that this is the very, very, skinniest amount that we need. They should be squeezing every penny out of all of those sources before our dollar is used. That's what I want to know. And I can't see that. So I realize that was a very long lead into that question, but I'm in part going into this because I won't be here to say who's watching these numbers, and I'm concerned about that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I will do my best to sort of plow through the layers that you've laid out for us. I will agree that this is not the full model or picture, and I think we can do some work to provide you all with some supplemental information there. But just as a reminder, the campus energy agreement is between the authority and the occupants of the campus, and primarily WSSA, the Western Stock Show Association, and CSU. So that the city is not a party to that agreement. The agreement that the city is a party to is that contingent commitment agreement whereby we have agreed to provide a loan for the shortfall of the revenues to meet the annual payment there, as well as any supplemental needs such as the temporary services I already talked about. We did project campus activities that, Brad already said that things were supposed to come online in 2023, 24, that type of thing. And there was, at the time of the contingent commitment agreement, a thought that there would be offsetting revenues. The authority would be earning revenues because those buildings would be available to them to book events and earn revenue from. And for a variety of reasons that I talked about, and I forgot to mention one also, is it wasn't just the construction market that was in upheaval, it was also the bond market that was in upheaval because of the pandemic. We were delayed by almost a full year for financing some of the assets on the campus. So I don't want to, make it seem like it was just what was going on through the construction process. It was also the financing process that delayed sort of the start of some of these buildings because of the pandemic. But NewCo the Mayor's Office of the National Western. They are the construction arm of the city for those public assets on the campus. You're right, they come to you, they talk about construction. Don't talk about the authority. This is an authority agreement. It is a different agreement. It is separate from the construction that happens on the campus. So I think we could do a better job of bringing that back through to you. It is part of our annual budget process that the Department of Finance works with the authority to understand what their financial situation is as a part of this loan request that's included in the annual budget. It's not something that we have presented to you on or included in our budget presentations, but something that we could. So we would be happy to take that forward if that is the appropriate forum for that to happen, or if you'd like to see it separately.
I mean, I won't be here during the budget presentations, but I think it might be a good idea. I think maybe one question is, do you have an independent auditor or some arm's length way of verifying what the revenues are? I mean, there's a lot of things you can spend revenues on. So how is it that you all verify what revenue is available to pay towards this system versus how much they're requesting, particularly from the general fund for this loan?
Well, the authority board is responsible for the authority's budget, and I am a member of the authority board. I sit as the treasurer, non-voting, of course, but so I think I have a monthly insight as to everything that's going on with the authority. From I get their banking statements, I get updates on where they are with their financials and their budget. So I do feel like we do have insight. I'm not an independent audit, but certainly very involved in how the authority is spending their money.
And I guess I would just ask, I mean, it's very difficult because we have no revenue money in front of us, you know, revenue amounts in front of us, but how much, so I'm just trying to do the math here. We're at about $2 million more in loan amount over the last line doesn't have a year in it. So I'm just trying to understand what the last line is. Sorry. I'm on slide 14.
It's a total.
Oh, that's a total. So that's the wrong number. So we're $1 million.
Yes.
So I was adding it up. So we're $1 million over for 3 years.
1.7 total.
Right.
Yes.
Just about, I'm just rounding. So $1 million over. How much of that, like, how much of that is, you know, is there, I guess the question is, how much of that is due to revenue shortfall? And are the revenues, like, what are revenue projections looking forward? Are revenues recovering? You know, I think, you know, you can't control the past, you can't control construction schedules, but like, is revenue recovery likely scenario? Are we on a trajectory? You know, I guess I think that, you know, this question about, I am interested in the revenues coming in from the center and where they're headed and their ability to take on more of this loan obligation.
So, Councilwoman, I think I would point to the second to the last column on the right, the net variance number, that $677,000, that is the revenue shortfall, because buildings that were projected to be online would have been online for bookings.
Okay.
For the 3 years that are presented here.
Do you think the 1 million is not a valid?
No, that is strictly due to the temporary services, the hookups that were provided to CSU for VITA being online almost 9 months before the system was operational.
Okay, so you think it's more the $677,000?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I appreciate your answers to the questions. I would like to see revenue projections compared to actuals.
Sure.
Backwards, and to the extent you have revenue projections going forward that you can provide. It sounds like I appreciated Councilwoman Black's question. The most valuable information you read off was not in the slide. So it would be helpful to get that information in writing. I would defer to my colleagues, but I do think it would be helpful to call out the information about this loan that's coming particularly from the general fund in your budget presentation. I think it's difficult in a 1,000-page budget to track this information each year, and I think it would be helpful with the new council term coming up for people to be able to track this information. I do think it's a complex project, and being able to provide oversight of it in the next term, it's helpful for you all to be calling it out and proactively sharing information about the full picture of it as it moves forward, because it is a complicated project. And I think the question about the sources of funding, I think the last thing I'll say about it is I do not think the general fund is the right source to be. I asked that the climate fund be considered as the source. This is a climate saving project. It is an energy saving project, and I would prefer that that be the source used. I understand that after the climate fund passed, that was not part of the consideration. I continue to ask that that be considered rather than the general fund. So I'll just renew my request that we avoid the general fund as the source for this, but I will leave it there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Kniech. I have a couple of questions also, and really appreciate the conversation that Councilmember Kniech brought up. I would like to, if reelected today, and if I continue to be chair of FinGov in the next term, have National Western Center and Department of Finance come back and maybe we do quarterly check-ins where we talk through some of the specific finances on these things. The Interceptor project is amazing. I have been on a tour. For those watching at home, if you haven't been on a tour, you should check it out. It's very cool. Brad, can you tell me, I went the last time I was on a tour, which was about a year ago, maybe a little less. You had mentioned that there was X number of outside sources who were coming to study the building and the project, to learn about it, to take the technology to their own cities. Can you remind me of how many that was, or talk about that a little bit?
I would say that we're doing some kind of a tour at least once a week. And that could be a local group, engineering group, or a professionals organization or association, to projects, actual projects that are looking to learn about this technology, considering it both here in Denver and in other cities around the country. We have had 2 delegations from outside the United States come to visit and tour as well. Colorado State University being on the campus and being a partner in this system. They have groups coming through all the time, as well as school groups and college groups. And there has been quite a bit more interest in this, in learning about the system than we anticipated, actually.
Okay, well, I really appreciate that. It is an incredible piece of technology, and as Councilmember Kniech mentioned, climate saving. So that's really exciting, and I think we should be proud that Denver's on the forefront of that technology. So that's really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Margaret, couple of questions for you. So just to refresh for viewers, the city is not a party to the usage agreement. It's the authority and then the 3 entities that have buildings on the campus. So, but we are a party to shoring up this loan in the event of shortfalls for the authority.
Correct.
So when a business entity is doing financing and loans or agreements like this are recorded, then there is a priority of repayment on loans. It's a legal thing that happens with commercial documents. Where is Denver on the priority list of repayment?
That's a great question. I don't think we've got a sort of, it's not a subordinate position that the city is in. Annually, when we are meeting with the authority to discuss sort of budgetary needs for the next year, the contingent commitment agreement requires them to provide their financial statements to us so that we can review and understand the revenue situation. So that is something that time of that discussion, we would review with them and understand if there are excess revenues within the prior years that would be available for repayment of the city loan at that time. And we would seek to apply it, or if there is a compelling reason for the authority to sort of keep that excess revenue for a need that earns more revenue, that might be a consideration that the city would make at that time.
Okay, really appreciate that. And then the loan agreement was for 40 years. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the campus energy agreement between the authority
the energy
and the
agreement was for 40 years.
And the contingent commitment agreement aligns with that also.
Okay, so the contingent commitment agreement is for 40 years.
Correct.
In those discussions in 2020, 3 years ago, before the whole world changed, we were looking at an expectation that it could potentially be 10 years.
Correct.
That the city would have to backfill a revenue shortfall to be able to fulfill this loan. Is that still the case then? Or, I mean, I guess, I don't know what calculations went into determining the potential 10-year time period. So I don't know, based on the information you've shared with us and when the buildings will be coming online that haven't, that are a little bit delayed due to construction length of time and materials and all of the kind of stuff that everyone is dealing with every day right now. So is that 10 years still a realistic period of time for us to expect to need to invest, or are you looking at potentially needing to expand that period of time?
Councilwoman, we have not done the work on that yet. I would just expect, given the time frame for those buildings that are not yet built or online, to probably push us back. So just because at the outset of this agreement, our projections included buildings being online by a certain date, and then the authority having needing some ramp up time, so to get the buildings out there and booked and that type of thing. So even when we had what we thought were pretty good dates for buildings being online, we gave ourselves 10 years to get to full participation of all events and activation of the campus there. So I don't want to get out in front of Brad on what the authorities' thoughts are or the construction timeframe, but I think, to be realistic, I think it's probably beyond the original 10 years.
Okay, that's good to know. And then in the conversations and calculations around that timeline, just to refresh for viewers watching at home, so the city had a P3 contract with a developer that was going to work on the Triangle project that ended up not moving forward due to COVID. Were those numbers included in the calculation of that 10-year timeline, and is that piece going to affect that is no longer happening? Is that piece going to affect those calculations too?
This project is only serving phases 1 and 2 right now, and that's what's in this particular deal structure.
Okay.
As Brad said, there is capacity within the interceptor pipe to service additional areas, buildings that could include what's known as the Triangle. So,
okay,
but it's not in this deal.
Great. So if future development occurs in the Triangle and they would like to connect to this, would that then speed up the timeline or potentially bring us back to that 10 years that we had originally estimated, or would it have some sort of positive effect on the authority's ability to repay on the original timeline?
I think it would probably be a separate deal because the current size of the campus utility building would need to be expanded. So there would probably be the sewer heat recovery capacity itself is enough to service additional things. but the equipment that's in the building right now would need to be adjusted for additional development to link into it somehow. So my guess is that we would be looking at some sort of expansion need if additional development outside phases 1 and 2 were brought forward.
Okay, really appreciate that. Thank you very much for being here. Brad, before we close out, did you have any closing comments or remarks you wanted to make?
I just want to say that we are having, with the facilities that we have online now, the Stockyards Event Center and the yards, the Stockyards itself, we are having really good success activating those. We're having events there almost every week. Those of you might remember our first big event was the Jurassic World exhibition. It was there all last summer. And there are events there just about every weekend right now. And as summer comes along, events will be happening in the stockyards. The workhorse projects, the real revenue generators, are going to be the Livestock Center and the Equestrian Center. Livestock Center is under construction. It broke ground in December. Excited for that to come online because it's a significant revenue generator for the campus. But we're working very hard to activate every square foot we can.
Okay, really appreciate that. And thank you very much for being here for the briefing. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.